Welcome to this week's edition of Hoist the Colors. I don't want to give it away, but this won't be the only edition. Fingers crossed, wink, wink of Hoist the Colors. And this one's gonna be a tough one because, as you all know, out in Pirate Land, this week didn't really go to plan. Even in a win against St. Peter's, that was just ugly. A 4-point win, which we'll start off with, and then of course we're gonna address the ugliness that was a loss against Fordham that this team, quite frankly, blew in the last minute of play. Up four, and I think it was a 4-point game with 20 seconds left, but we'll touch on that later. But the Pirates lose a quote unquote bye game at Walsh in the regular season for the first time since 1989, in the first month of the season after they had just reached the Final Four. But we'll put that in the back burner. I guess we'll start off with the good, and I don't even know if you can call it good, but the game against St. Peter's, for all intents and purposes, yes, the offense was ugly, but they raced out to an 11-point lead. It was 31 to 20 towards the end of the first half. And then they allow the Peacocks to score seven of the last 8 points, and that gave them life, and that kind of swung the momentum in their favor. So, Pat, for you, I mean, I'll share my take in a second, but I mean, how important was that stretch at the end of the first half that kept St. Peter's hanging around and gave the Pirates a scare?
Well, well, let's go. There's an overriding theme here about, and nobody's going to say otherwise,
Hmm.
that, and we touched upon this last week. Seton Hall is right now a terrible offensive team. Uh, I don't remember the last time. I mean, look, there have been times where teams have struggled offensively. Kevin Willard teams had this habit of going into scoring slumps, 4 minute stretches without scoring, 5 minute scores of stretch without scoring. But at least those teams had somebody who you could trust as saying, all right, we're going to give the ball to this guy. Whether it was a guy like Sterling Gibbs, whether it was Isaiah Whitehead, whether it was Miles Powell, whether it was Desi Rodriguez, and the line goes on about here's a guy right now. There is nobody on this team who is a go-to player. There are two guys who, there are three guys who maybe kind of looked apart as someone who might be a go-to player, and that's Chauncey Jenkins, uh, Isaiah Coleman, and Yassim Toumeh. One of the problems they had in that stretch against St. Peter's at the end of the half was that they had put Toumeh and Jenkins on the bench so that the two guys who were their leading scorers on Monday night weren't there to sort of answer the mini run that St. Peter's went on. And even during most of the second half, Holloway was still trying to figure out, his rotation. Here's, when do I bring Dylan Adewusu in? When do I bring Zion Harmon in? When do I bring Scotty Middleton in? What am I doing about Garway Duel? Who am I gonna Duel, for example, you know, in two games so far, we'll touch more about Duel maybe. Let's talk about both. Let's talk about Garway Duel for a second. You bring a guy in who, when he was recruited by Providence, people thought he was an NBA prospect, top 50 guy. And you look at him and he's 6'5". He's got a ridiculous wingspan. He looks more athletic than Kadari Richmond ever looked. Unfortunately, you put a ball in his hands and you tell him, uh, shoot the ball. And for some reason, he looks like a guy who's played basketball his whole life, but has no idea how to shoot a basketball. So when you can't score, you can't say it's one of those things where you can't trust that you're going to hold on to 11-point leads or 8-point leads or whatever type of lead because you're not guaranteed that you're going to have somebody come in sort of like a stopper. Who's the guy who you're going to give? who's the Miles Powell or who's the Kadari Richmond or who's the Jared Roden who you're going to give the ball to, and you're going to see 2 or 3 points on the board your next possession, so that a team that's come back from an 11-point game to bring you within 4 or 5 is now going to be down 7 or 8 points again. Seton Hall doesn't have that right now. And until they can sort of figure that out, no lead is safe.
I mean, everything about this game was ugly. And I just wanna, I want to bring up something about Duval, and I just realized this as you were talking about it. He's got all these skills, but the one thing he can't do is shoot the ball. It's like Serrano being able to hit the ball 500 feet, but he can't hit a curveball. Like that's, by the way, that's not going to be my only major league reference here. I'm saving one for later. I'm not going to give it away, but I know it's a damn good one. Um, but everything about this game is ugly. There were 53 fouls combined, like 4 or 5, I think 4 technical fouls, like 2 separate instances of guys, one on each team, getting offsetting technical fouls. Doesn't help that the notorious BOC Brian O'Connell was on this game. I once I saw the officiating crew, I was like, God damn it. Night one, and we get this. Great. Here we go. And lo and behold, I kind of spoke into existence because it was a mess and a train wreck. I think 3 or 4 guys on St. Peter's fouled out. And they were hitting their 3-point shots early and often in this game. I think their first 5 or 6 makes from the field were from the 3-point line. And listen, a 3-point is more than a layup. So 3 points over 2, like that's how they were able to accumulate points and stay in the game. And it didn't help that there were stretches where the offense became anemic, mainly, the point of Toomey and Jenkins being out of the game at the same time. You needed one of them out there, and Shaw is one of those guys where he's gonna learn from his mistakes that he makes from game to game. I mean, hopefully that will include not breaking his wrist at halftime. Which I'm only poking fun. I'm not. That's not a demeaning thing because I totally get it. Like I'd be frustrated too. And not to mention, I sympathize with the broken wrist thing. I've broken my wrist 3 times, twice on my left, once on my right. It's just not fun. So I'm hoping that that broken wrist will heal sooner rather than later for Shaw. But yeah, Jenkins, when needed to, he did take over. I mean, he had 19 points in this game. He was tremendous. And he was a big reason why the Pirates were able to hang on and win, and leave the Rock with a victory by the skin of their teeth. But unfortunately, that didn't hold true the second time around, even with Isaiah Coleman coming back and playing in this game. Very much like the St. Peter's game, Seton Hall got a lead at the half that was pretty small. And they had their chances to pull away in the second half. And Fordham just kept hanging around. And credit to Jackie Johnson III, who just had a monster game. And we'll touch on him because he played a big role in the finish, as all of you may know. But Pat, your overall takeaway from again, it was almost like watching the same game, except this time different outcome.
Well, I mean, the game was not as ugly because there were not as many fouls called,
Right.
and uh, there were times when the offense looked a little more competent. Uh, I think some have said that one of the issues is that Holloway had to play Toomey at the center position as opposed to his more natural position as a power forward. The problem is it's not as if Fordham had these world beaters on the. They had the one guy. They have the one guy, Tashimba,
Yeah, number 30.
who was apparently the Atlantic 10 Defensive Player of the Year last year. But it's not like you. What are you? I guess the point is, if you're having trouble keeping him off the boards, I mean, he only had 11 rebounds. So I guess if Toomey couldn't really contain himself, that he had to foul whoever was on the inside, then that's sort of an issue of, is Toomey still trying to learn how to play defense against better competition, which then translates to he's in trouble when he starts seeing, Big East caliber big men. but hopefully Manny Okafor comes back, and that sort of resolves the issue about who's going to get the minutes at the center, and Tume can play more at the power forward where he's not taking on the opposing center for every team. But then you get to that issue that I talked about a minute ago, is that who on the team was going to be the stop? Who was the guy who was going to make the shot that was going to keep Seton Hall ahead and maybe get Seton Hall up by a couple of possessions? So I get they were up by a couple of possessions in the last 20 seconds when the disaster of that game, but you don't put yourself in a position. You shouldn't be in a position like that the way that game was going if you had more consistent offense. Part of it, Jenkins didn't play as well as he did Monday night. Uh, Wusu, Wusu was Wusu. He, he had his type of game, but that's the type of game when if he's getting better, he's scoring 12 or 15 points and not 8 points. Then you had Isaiah Coleman come back, but you knew he was rusty and he looked that way, even though he made a couple of very nice plays. And then some of the other guys you thought might be able to give you some offense, absolute no-shows. Middleton, again, was a missing person on Saturday. Zion Harmon only played because Garway Dole got injured 5 minutes into the second half, and Zion Harmon was a non-factor. And Garway Dole was Garway Dole. He just, again, he just showed again that he's as good as he is in terms of running an offense, as good as he is on the defensive end. He's a liability if he can't shoot. And nobody could hit a foul shot. Which is another problem that when you miss. I think they ended up missing, if I'm correct here, they missed 8 foul shots.
Yeah, and they
You lose a game by 1 point, you miss 8
50%,
foul shots.
50% from the line.
Right. If you're 75%, you win that game by 3. And if you're 75%, 12 or 16, you're not up by 4 points with 20 seconds to go. You're up by 8 points. And then a flukish thing like a guy getting fouled on a 3-point shot.
Even though we didn't get touched.
Well, that's, again, my thought about it, when a play like that happens, you can't put yourself in a position where you let a bad call beat you, or you let a fluke play like the ball dropping out of Wusu's hands beat you. You can't put yourself, if you're only up by 4 with 20 seconds to go, you're asking for something strange to happen. If everyone remembers a year and a half ago when we played DePaul in the first round of the Big East tournament and we were up by 5 with 25 seconds to go, and then for some strange reason we forgot how to play in the last 25 seconds, and DePaul hits a 3, and then we foul a different DePaul guy shooting a 3. They get 6 points. They beat us by a point. So you should, team like that, you should be far enough ahead, and that's an indictment, of course, on how atrocious the offense was playing, and then some of the issues that the defenders were having in not stopping Johnson. I mean, one of the things that people said about Johnson was that Johnson basically does everything off of his left. So unfortunately, what happened on the last play was that the defense didn't set itself up. Coleman's doing the main defending, but the other defenders did not sort of block his path to force him to go to his right, where he doesn't shoot the ball quite as well as if he's coming off of his left side. So the problem is you set up a whole bunch of little things that go badly, and this Seton Hall team is not the type of team that's going to have a large margin for error where you can allow a bunch of little plays to happen and expect to basically survive. They have to play at a pretty high level, and they have to play with very few mistakes in order to have the type of impact you'd like to have this season. I mean, they can recover from this. Let's not be, look, a whole bunch of teams have bad losses and they recover. If it's funny, the night before, and you mentioned the 89 game, a year later in the 1990-91 season, Seton Hall loses on a buzzer beater at Fordham. And then that team, a few months later, goes on to the Elite Eight. That's not to say, of course, that this team is as good as a team of Terry DeHare, Jerry Walker, Arturis Carnation. I mean, they had some legitimate big time players on the last Seton Hall team that made the Elite Eight, but that team lost to Fordham. So you can recover from a game like this and end up putting together a halfway reputable season. 2 years ago, we lost to Siena on a neutral site Thanksgiving weekend down in Florida, and they put the season back together until Richmond went down. So they can recover from this, and part of the process, of course, starts on Wednesday. But you basically, hopefully, what Holloway has done the last couple of days, looking at film, is pointing out this is your stupid mistake, this is your stupid mistake, and the other thing is hopefully they're taking a whole bunch of foul shots to make sure we don't see 8 for 16 from the foul line again.
Yeah, you're telling me, man. So I have several things. Number one, we only took 9 3-pointers the whole game. We made 4 of them, which is percentage wise, like, all right, efficiency, great. Isaiah Cole, there were a couple things in the second half, particularly. So Seton Hall went up 8 at the start of the second half. Fordham calls a timeout. They need an answer in order to prevent Seton Hall from getting it to double digits. And who else provides the shot? And it's a 3 that gets it down to 5. Who else? Jackie Johnson hits the big 3, cuts it to 5, and Seton Hall, Fordham was able to just muster something up from that because they were able to take the lead. I think it got to 46-45. And then eventually Matt Zona, who is supposed to be supposed to be a guy who they had high hopes for, struggled shooting the ball, and then he hits his first 3 of the game, got his first points to make it 49-47. But who else? Who gets the shot that's the answer to put Seton Hall back up by 1? It's Isaiah Coleman, knocks down a corner 3, and you just set up perfectly, nothing but net. I'm telling you, like, once Isaiah's healthy, he's going to be the guy, like, fully healthy, that is. He could still provide that in spurts. I mean, he had 7 points, and he was the only guy that went to the free throw line and didn't miss on Saturday, which is kind of startling. Yassine, to me, even though he did foul out, by the way, that 5th call, bullshit. Even my dad, we're both officials. He was watching it. He said, how was that on to me when it was the other guy, Simbila, who was illegally displacing him on his box out with his hands? If you want to back your ass up into the guy, like, that's all fine and well, but once you use your hands to displace, that's when it becomes illegal. That's when it becomes a foul on that player. And to me, also, he didn't even go over the back. It's technically, just gonna debunk this myth now for all of you. There's no such thing as an over the back foul, okay? It's a push from behind. Like, yeah, sure, he may be going over his back or
There needs to be contact.
there has to be yes, but it's not the wording is not over the back foul. I just want to make that abundantly clear. That's my side point. To me's 5th foul was bogus, and he, unfortunately, because
Yeah, but then the problem is, how is he getting the first 4 fouls to begin with? You sort of, let's sort of play on that there were a few, like the phantom 3-point foul. Yes. I don't think that a league bay fouled the Fordham guy with 15 seconds to go that gave Fordham the 3 foul shots that made it a 1-point game. But then you can't put yourself in a position where you get a bad call. Tume puts himself in a position where a bad call can foul him out of the game because he's made bad plays to get the first 4 fouls to begin with. So sometimes when you lose a game on a bad call, you set yourself up where a bad call can beat you. And to sort of get back to something I said a couple of minutes ago, they didn't play well. They unfortunately they didn't play well enough as they should have to keep a bad call from beating them. So, yes, the Tume fifth foul might have been a bad one. The 3-point one was a bad one. There were a couple of other ones which could have gone either way. I know that Pat Driscoll was one of the referees on the game. I actually thought he did a pretty good job because he let them play most of the afternoon. Not a lot of fouls called in this game, which looked a lot better than Monday night's game. But then you can't put yourself in a position where, yeah, a bad call beats you. And that's unfortunately, I mean, the onus is on the fact that, again, Seton Hall couldn't play offense and they had trouble with situational defense. And some of it, of course, is again, Holloway not playing the right guys defensively in certain situations. I mean, there were times, and he had to do this because Dual was hurt most of the second half. But I'll tell you that as good a defensive player as Dylan Adewusu was, he couldn't handle Jackie Johnson on Saturday. And that might have been something where try anybody else. As much as you may not trust Zion Harmon in that spot, why not give him a shot? As much as, maybe you try Jenkins on him for a couple of possessions. Then there were a couple of times Seton Hall went zone. And the zone threw Fordham off on a couple of possessions. So maybe in the last play, you play a zone in that spot, and maybe a zone causes Johnson to think a little bit on that last play instead of I'm going to get the ball 20 feet out and I'm just going to go to my left and just drive and drive off a screen and then throw up the 10-footer that obviously went in the basket and went in. So there are it's as much as you say, yeah, okay, if this foul doesn't get called or that foul doesn't get called, the outcome of the game is different, which is true. Don't put yourself in a position. That's sort of something. Don't put yourself in that position where a bad call is going to cause you to lose a game like this.
So the other point I was going to make about Toomey, he was 5 for 5 from the floor, made his only 3-point attempt of the game, but from the free throw line, he was 1 for 4. So here's the second reference I'm going to make for Major League and from the sequel. Almost like Rube Baker syndrome, where Rube Baker could nail a guy it's going down trying to steal second, but he can't throw the ball back to the pitcher. Like Toomey can knock down threes and have a perfect day from the floor, but he can't make the free throw. Like it's funny how that like pans out, but yeah, I just think there were by the way, so Driscoll, I thought he had a good game. Jeff Clark, I felt like was the best out of the three, and clearly the meme of the three dragons, and then the one's got the face. That the droopy dragon was Tony Henderson. He made both of those shitty calls. The one against Toomey for the fifth foul, and then the phantom foul on like the guy from Fordham kicked his leg out, and he bought it. Like I mean, more importantly, that's like if he did make contact, like there was no contact at all. But if the shooter made contact, if anything, it's an offensive foul. But really, this is what it should be. That motion right there, that's a flop. That's a warning in the book. So that's just my personal opinion. And listen, yeah, they left a lot of points at the line. They left 8 points at the line. You're up 1, and they break the press really well. A league mate was able to fake out defender, streak up the court a little bit, and it's just like, how in the world do you just completely forget the situation? Time and score. You're up 1. They have to foul you. There's no shot clock. Dribble this shit out. And if anything, make them come to you. Then you pass it out, maybe a little closer, rather than trying to rush something. Let the game come to you rather than you coming to the game.
I think the instinct though is right. I don't blame a league babe. I mean, if anybody's at fault at that, it's Wusu.
Yes,
because you cannot. It's like a guy. It's like a punt returner in the NFL. You cannot drop. That's just something. Yeah, look again. It's a small. A lot of guys made small plays. I mean, Jenkins misses the foul shot that could have put us up by 5.
Yeah.
Wusu lets the ball hit off of his hands. Other guys miss foul shots during the whole game. So if in that sense, everybody you could. There were what 11 guys who played for Seton. 11 guys played, and you could find a play that each of those 11 guys didn't make. That if any of them make that play, And even the guys who played well in the game, even guys like Yalden and guys like Godswill and Tume, who all played pretty well, and Coleman, of course. Coleman went 1 for 6 from 2-point range. How does that happen? What bad shots did he take? I mean, so even the guys who played well made a bad play or two, which was any play like that is the difference in a game. You lose by 1 point. So yeah, there's a whole again. It's and part of it is Holloway's take on this is that it's early in the season. Guys are still trying to figure things out. And again, if you do go off and win some games, you win Wednesday night against Hofstra, you win 2 games in Charleston, you beat Oklahoma State, then all right, you've salvaged something in the non-conference, and you still have something to play for when Big East play starts. But you lose if they lose the Hofstra on Wednesday, they only, let's say, win one or no games in Charleston. Then, for all intents and purposes, the season is over. There's still time to work things out. They have 3 days from when the final buzzer went down Saturday afternoon to when they have to drive out to Long Island Wednesday night to try to figure some stuff out, and hopefully now that Isaiah Coleman's gotten some of the rust off, there'll be they'll have something to work with offensively on Wednesday night. And then the defense has a big challenge on Wednesday night because Hofstra can score.
They sure, yeah,
Uh,
they sure can. I mean, I was looking at their numbers and like I was like legitimately astounded. And Speedy Claxton, it's only appropriate that his teams play at a very high tempo. It's only appropriate, right? And by the way, I will say, if there was any one guy that really stood out outside of to me, man, I love Gus Yalden, man. Like the energy that he brings, like he just this is his first game he got played at Walsh, and we fans we know how important of a home court advantage that place provides. I mean, just look at the NIT last year for crying out loud. He got it, and he kept those fans engaged. With even if he wasn't the one making the basket, um, he was the one egging the fans on, trying to pump up the crowd. He was doing that all game long. And he came to play. He went 3 for 6 from the floor, finished with 6 points. Got a nice bucket off a perfect pass, by the way, like a bounce pass, entry pass from to me. I think it was early in the second half. To me, just perfect entry pass on the bounce. And hit Yalden for a beautiful layup. I'm telling you, like, I think you're going to see Yalden getting a lot of minutes at the 5 over Arierne. I mean, it's going to depend on how God's will does in the early stages of the Hofstra game. He did look much better on Saturday than he did against St. Peter's. I think just the first game in his college career, he got some jitters out of the way. So he was a lot more calm and composed and played that way against Fordham in his second go around. But yeah, let's bring it back to Wednesday. We're at Nassau Coliseum taking on Hofstra. This Hofstra team's 2-0. They beat Iona their last time out, and then they beat Old Westbury. Apparently, it's in New York State, and I've never heard of that school. It's probably
I think they're D2.
they're D2. Okay,
Yeah,
they're
they're
either
not.
they were either 2 or 3.
Yeah,
But
they're not. Yeah, the Iona game was particularly impressive because uh, they scored 90 points, which that's something which obviously Seton Hall hasn't been within 30 points of that in either of these 2 games last week. I don't know what I mean. Our good friend Jaquan Sanders is lighting up scoreboards the way people thought he was going to at Seton Hall, but for whatever reason, he never really cracked Shaheen Holloway's rotation. But now he's at the Paul. He's now at Hofstra. I guess for whatever reason, Speedy Claxton has put something in him where he's finding his way offensively. The other guy you got to be really worried about is this guy John Aranjan. He transferred from Iona. Interestingly enough, he was their second leading scorer last season, and he's a guy who can legitimately score the basketball. And then They have a third guard, Cruz Davis, who was a Rick Pitino commitment at Iona a couple of years ago. Went to St. John's last season, but I think he sort of never really cracked their rotation. But then he goes to Iona, and he's put up two pretty good games in the start. And then they have a big man who Iona fans thought was a diamond in the rough who could develop into something. And his name is Silas Sunday. He's actually Irish, which is interesting. Not a lot of elite basketball players come out of Ireland, but he's a 7 foot guy who he could provide a lot of difficulty for Seton Hall's bigs. Although I do think that on a positive note, I think we're actually better at the center position than we were last season, and that's without Manny Okafor getting any run so far because he's been injured. I think Yalden has shown a little bit why he's a 4 star, because I do think that he has the size, he's got the touch inside in order to do some damage, and I think God's will has shown something in these first two games, a little more than you saw from, let's say, Hutchins Everett last season. So I think that the center position, I think if the center position was a question, I think Seton Hall has come up with an answer to that. Unfortunately, they have to come up with answers for the other positions on the court, and those are all a work in progress. I mean, can you go with Garway Dole at point guard with the fact that he has trouble scoring and has trouble hitting foul shots? Uh, what's I mean, I think Jenkins is going to get a lot of minutes, but are we going to get the good Chauncey Jenkins or the not so good Chauncey Jenkins? I think Coleman's a regular in this rotation, but I think even Coleman's going to have good nights and bad nights. And then I don't think you're entirely going to. Dylan Adewusu is still an important piece on this team. Unfortunately, he cannot be making the type of stupid mistakes that we see him make once or twice a game. Because unfortunately, those are types of mistakes that can cost you in a game like Saturday afternoon, where you're within a possession or two the whole second half. So in that sense, those are the type of things that, and I guess the good news is that for the other guys, there are opportunities to make a mark. Prince of Lake Bay's been okay the first two games. I know a lot of people are like he doesn't shoot the ball very well, but I think that he's shown he scored 20 points, 10 rebounds in the first two games. I think he has shown why Shaheen Holloway has a lot of confidence in him. And I think if you can get that from him every night, particularly when you get a full complement of players, I think that's going to be a good contribution for Seton Hall going forward. But then you have to find Scotty Middleton. You have to find Zion Harmon. You have to find Desheen Felton. Those guys have to be able to pick up the slack on the nights where Jenkins and Coleman may not have it. And it's an open question as to whether or not anybody can give you offense you can trust any given. There are probably going to be a few nights Seton Hall doesn't break 60. They haven't done it yet. And I think there are going to be nights when you play good competition where, Seton Hall may have trouble breaking 50. I think that's just the reality you're going to have to live with because, nobody has stepped up and shown he is a go-to elite scorer. You don't have a Cam Jones on this team. You don't have a Alex Caravan on this team. You don't have a you don't have some you don't have Kalkbrenner's a set, but Kalkbrenner, you want to put him in that. I'm talking about an elite guard who is going to get you 20, or an elite wing who's going to get you 20, 25 points or get you something up there. You don't have a steady 15, 20 guy like Seton Hall has had in the past.
Yeah, I just think that the worst thing that you could run into, given the state of the offense, is you're going to face a team that is going to speed you up. No pun intended, given Coach Speedy Claxton over there. But I'm sure that they're game planning for that, and they've been practicing against this Hofstra offense with a lot of tempo and speeding things up and having to learn to play against that, especially on the defensive end. And the good thing is, I mean, now they know what Jaquan Sanders is all about, unless something has just a switch has been flipped for Jaquan, where he's really tapped into and unlocked his scoring potential that we only really saw in glimpses maybe 2 to 3 times over his 2 years at Seton Hall, maybe four. I remember the Georgia game in the NIT semifinals was one where I remember seeing like, damn, like this guy can be a pretty good contributor. And granted, it was with Coleman not being there for I think he was ill. That's why he missed the NIT semifinals and the championship game. I mean, granted, that was 7 months ago. Jesus Christ. But anyways, um, I believe that they can win this game. But they're gonna have to just figure it out offensively. Hopefully, Isaiah Coleman's second game back, he'll play at that level that, like, for example, like Ari Aronay, how he had the jitters the first game and then played much better the second time around. I mean, I definitely wouldn't say Coleman had the jitters, but he could have played a lot better. I mean, as you mentioned, he went 1 for 6 from 2 point range. He did knock down his only 3 point attempt. I mean, that just goes to show he's got that dog in him where he made that big three when the team absolutely needed it. So I think he's going to be the guy that's going to have to make the plays that they need to down the stretch because I just know it's going to be a close game. There's just no ifs, ands, or buts about it. I have faith though that they're going to bounce back and win. I remember after Seton Hall got blown out by Villanova last year, and then after they beat Xavier, Shaw said, if you thought my team was going to come out tonight and play the same way that they did on Sunday, you got it all wrong. So I think we're going to see something similar to that. I'm not going to say they're going to pound Hofstra into the ground like they did with Xavier in that game I mentioned, but I think they're going to turn it around and, knock on wood here that they hit the 60-point mark. And then they'll carry that momentum into a game against Wagner, who has already challenged themselves. They already opened the season at Rutgers. And then right before they play Seton Hall, they play St. John's at Carnesecca also Wednesday night, not far from Nassau Coliseum over at Carnesecca. So I mean, might as well segue then into Wagner. What's your outlook on that? And quickly also, what you expect out of the Hofstra game?
Well, it's funny. What's former guest of the show, Brian Franklin, uh, mentions at the end of that Fordham game, why not play up tempo? The point you're making about with, Hofstra may force you to run, so why not try to run with them? I mean, it's not like in theory we should have better basketball players than what Hofstra has. As much as we like what Davis and Arduin and Sanders have looked like the first couple of games for Hofstra, look, there's a reason why Shaheen Holloway basically let Sanders go to Hofstra. If Sanders was playing the way Holloway expected him to play, Sanders is still on this team. Sanders is probably in this starting lineup for all we know. So, you've got to basically just set a message that, hey, we've got better talent. So maybe instead of trying this half court offense, which doesn't work very well, maybe we should let people play more up their instincts. Maybe you let Jenkins do some things that are not part of what your offensive structure looks like. Isaiah Coleman tends to play well when he's sort of trying to make his own play for himself or looking to throw a pass to the wing. I forgot who made the one really nice pass to Tume on the wing. It might have been Jenkins, but don't quote me on. There was a one pass middle of the first half. Let Prince Aligbe, try something. I know he has struggled a little bit, but maybe let him try something. Maybe if you're playing faster, you're not worried about the one thing somebody else said. I forgot who said it, was that there are guys wearing Seton Hall uniforms who are afraid to miss. Like, I don't want to be the guy who misses the shot because, then, who say maybe this is the type of situation. Sometimes a team plays to win, and sometimes a team plays not to lose. And if you're playing not to lose, unfortunately, what happens is you lose because then you're not making the plays you have to make to win. So maybe you just have to go out there and take it to Hofstra. Their guards are not big. We are going to play a backcourt which is Wusu and Duel and whatever minutes we play Middleton, even Jenkins. It's not like Davis, Arduine, and Sanders are all in the 6'2" to 6'4" range. So it's not like our guards cannot stand up to the Hofstra guards. And in terms of what they look like defensively, it looks like people can move. It looks like the Seton Hall guards have some defensive skills. So they should be able to frustrate the Hofstra backcourt. So maybe you just have to make sure to say, when you're saying, hey, we're Seton Hall, we're a Big East school. Hofstra playing as good as Hofstra may be, and Hofstra's still in the Colonial Athletic Association, just like Fordham is in the Atlantic 10. If you are playing for a Big East school, sometimes you have to act like you're playing for a Big East school. You can't just sit back and sometimes you just have to assert yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what you have to do in a game like that against Hofstra, and then ultimately turn that around and do that in a game like a team against Wagner. I mean, really, this is a week where you have to basically remind everybody that you're a Big East school and you have to take care of business against two local opponents who are good. I'm not going to Wagner made the NCAA tournament last season. Donald Copeland is one of the best young coaches nobody really knows about. And I don't think he's going to be long for Wagner because I think somebody's going to pick him up. And Speedy Claxton is almost as good as a coach as he was as a player. So it's not like you're playing bad competition this week, but you do have better players than what will be suiting up in Hofstra and Wagner uniforms. And you have to send the message because that's what a Big East, because if you can't do that as a Big East school, then what are your expectations when you're playing somebody who is as good, if not a little bit better? You play Connecticut. Connecticut's better than us. You play Creighton. Creighton is better than us. What are your expectations when you're playing teams who are on your level or maybe a little bit better than you? Is it just something where we have to wave the white flag and accept 20-point losses when you get to January and February? Or do you remind everybody that you're a Big East school, that your coach has won an NIT championship and has been to an Elite Eight? I mean, this is really what they have to look in the mirror at the next few days and say to you have to give yourself the affirmation that you can do it and that you're playing to win and not just so afraid of your own shadow that you end up losing a game like one against Hofstra. Because you lose to a team like Hofstra on Wednesday night, what expectation do you have going into Charleston? It's not like while they're not playing any maybe top 25 teams, I think Nevada might be ranked. I think Nevada was getting votes, and Nevada's the type of team we might play in the second round. But VCU looked awfully good, beating up Boston College on Saturday afternoon. Miami's not going to be a pushover. Vanderbilt is going to be better than a lot of people thought they were going to be, and we might play Vanderbilt in the second round. So in that sense, if you can't beat a team like Hofstra, who can you expect to beat when you're down in Charleston? And then, of course, unfortunately, then the cycle goes all the way down from there. You might be able to pick off Monmouth and NJIT when you come back to the Rock, but then you got to play Oklahoma State and Rutgers. So, this is really a gut check week. Get 2 wins, get 2 good looking wins, and then get yourself ready for Charleston next week.
So I was just looking at the Wagner with their upcoming schedule and whatnot, trying to look at their roster. They number one, they're returning a lot of the guys that were on last year's tournament team that, by the way, got their first tournament win at the D1 level in program history. And they're playing St. John's Wednesday night, who, by the way, I just saw they're ranked. They're ranked 22nd in the country according to the AP poll. So good for them and I mean, overall good for the Big East more than anything. I'm like, like I'm just saying like, oh, St. John's has a number next to their name in the first for the
The,
first
the
time.
top end of the conference is pretty good. The bottom end is
Yeah. Yeah,
the
yeah. I
bottom end
mean,
is pretty. There's probably a line in the sand. The funny thing you mentioned that Wagner's bringing a lot of people back, but they're also bringing a lot of people back from a team Seton Hall lost by 22 last season in a game that was it was a well contested game, but we were clearly better than Wagner, and I think this team should be clearly better than Wagner. And that game next Saturday, this that game coming up on Saturday should not be close. That's a game you have to win by at least 10, 15 points, have a consistent double digit lead the whole second half. And then, depending on how big that lead is, if you need to make other adjustments on the offensive defensive end in order to get ready for Charleston, that's what the last 5 or 6 minutes of that game should be. I guess the one thing you will say about Seton Hall is that the second string is not a. I guess the weird part is you can say the second string is not a big drop off from the first string, but that's because the first string really isn't that good. So it's not like we've seen everybody so far, and we know what everybody is. It's just a matter of getting the right combinations in place for late game situations, for situations where you need offense, for situations you need defense, and so on and so forth. Getting the right pieces in place. And maybe I know Shaheen Holloway doesn't want to do this. And he has told everybody all during the offseason, I want to play a 10-man rotation. And God bless him for wanting to do that. But the flip side to that is that if you've got 6 or 7 guys who are really establishing themselves above and beyond on this team, you have to be ready to play the hot hand because if you have 6 or 7 guys who are performing well, you should be ready to ride those guys. You should be ready. I know you don't want to play a lot of people more than 30 minutes a game, but if that's what it's going to take to win games, you're going to have to change tactics. And if it means that you're going to hurt the feelings of a Zion Harmon or Scotty Middleton or Godswill Erskine or whoever is not going to get minutes because they don't deserve to be in the top 7 in the rotation, so be it. This is about the name on the front of the jersey and not the name in the back. That's just something that's what DDD is about. Dedication, desire, and I should know
discipline.
what the third one is.
Discipline.
Discipline. This is what it's about. And that's about putting team above me. That's just something you mentioned Yalden a few minutes ago. And it's funny that he's getting as excited when he's on the bench watching somebody else make a play as he gets when he gets a big rebound or when he hits a basket. And I think you need to have 13 guys in Seton Hall uniforms who had that same attitude when a teammate makes a good play as a guy like Gus Yalden has. So I think that's something which will come as people get together, but that's something you got to get sooner rather than later with this team, or else it will spiral to the point where when we get to 3 weeks from today, which is December 1st, and they've come back from Charleston and they're 3-5, where are you going to go from there? Where are you going to go if you play terribly in Charleston and you lose to a team like Hofstra?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, positive thoughts, positive thoughts. Got to have good vibes, and have that belief. Even though the big thing that's given me solace in the face of that loss is the fact that not only did Butler, they lost to Austin P Friday night, but Villanova lost to Columbia 2 days before that. So I can sleep better at night knowing that those teams had their little difficult run-ins just like Seton Hall has. So like this isn't just a one-off thing. Like Seton Hall is not the unicorn, the outlier that we lost a bye game and no one else has, and two other teams have. So I can be a little more at ease with that. But man, it would be so it's critical that Seton Hall wins these two games and that they play well. I mean, for the love of God, can we not only just get 60 or more points, but can we get double digit fast break points? We failed to hit double digit fast break points each of the first two games. Like, I know that we aren't a great offensive team and that we like to slow it down, but come on, we at least 10 points. I mean, we've gotten, I think, seven the first two games, or 13 combined, 13 or 14 combined the first two games. So that's going to be my big wish for this week.
and and hit 75% of your foul shots.
Yes. Yes.
You can't go, what was it, 62% against St. Peter's and 50% against Fordham. Because again, you're leaving points on the table. And that could very well be the difference. Winning or losing close, and that translates to the Big East, by the way. That translates to whether or not it could be the difference between whether you have a DePaul-like season where you go 4-16, or whether you end up around the 500 mark. The fact that you're not leaving points on the board because you can't hit foul shots, because teams will figure it out. You look at Duel, for example, and you say, you know what, there could be a game when you're beating, let's say, a team like Creighton up by four with a couple of minutes to go, and then they go to a foul Garway Duel strategy, and Duel can't hit foul shots, and that lets a team like Creighton come back and beat you in the last minute. I just that's a Creighton's just the example I use, but that's the type of game where if you're playing better than a good team, but you can't convert foul shots late, and you're basically telling a team, guess what? The blueprint is put us on the foul line, and we'll let you sneak back in the game. People are going to do that to you. That is the difference between good teams and very good teams. And a good team's not going to do much better in the Big East than 8-12 or 7-11. If you want to be a very good team and a team that may be thinking about an NCAA tournament bid, you got to do those things like hitting foul shots, what you just said, getting scoring points off of turnovers, doing that type of stuff that makes the good teams very good teams. So Wednesday will be a good test of that. Wednesday will be, have they basically sat and practiced the last two nights and done what they had to do to win? So
So,
let's hope Wednesday is the turning point of the season, so to speak.
okay, so to wrap up this episode, so my quick final thought regarding Tony Henderson just making two egregiously bad calls, especially on the 3-point foul. Clearly, shooter wasn't touched. The league bay never touched him. No one even close in the vicinity. Imagine what could have happened if instead of Shaheen Holloway on the wrong end of that call, imagine if it was like a Dan Hurley or a Rick Pitino or a Sean Miller. Those three guys would make sure that they rip Tony Henderson to shreds right then and there, and probably get ejected, right? Because Tony Henderson wasn't hearing it. He made a bad call, and Shaw was trying to talk to him, and he was standing so far away from him that he was doing his best to not talk to him, because he felt like either he's internalizing because he knew he messed up, or B, he's so delusionally confident that he got the call right that he wasn't willing to hear any kind of criticism that he might potentially be wrong, which he was, because he's got the holier than thou mentality, which is wrong as an official. And I should say that, especially because I've had my fair share of run-ins in that similar situation. But if either of those three guys I mentioned, Hurley, Patino, or Miller, if they were on the wrong end of that, they would blacklist Henderson and make sure that he never comes near another one of his games, at least for the rest of the season, and especially in Big East play. So Tony Henderson should be lucky that he didn't get wrung out by Shaheen Holloway, compared to how the higher ranking senior Big East coaches, the ones that are more clout and power, would have. But Pat, I know you got something much better. I know we were kind of talking about before we started recording for your last thought to end the episode.
Oh, which I don't remember. Were we talking about?
Seth
No.
Davis.
Oh, Dave. What do you mean, Davis? Oh, Seth Davis.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Uh, we're not going to talk a lot. I don't want to. Let's say a couple of things about when Seton Hall lost. Seth Davis made a knee-jerk tweet about if Seton Hall had NIL resources, or if Shaheen Holloway had NIL resources. I think there's a growing. I think this is something which we'll probably address. We'll probably have to address it the whole time. A lot of people talk about, well, Shaheen Holloway doesn't have NIL resources, and Seth Davis isn't the first one. Seth Greenberg has said it. Rob Dowster has said it. Jeff Goodman has said it. A whole bunch of people say, why doesn't Seton Hall have NIL resources? The first point is, you know, where are they getting that information? I get it. Yeah, I get it that, the exhibit A is St. John's gave Kadari Richmond a whole lot more money than Seton Hall was willing or able to give Kadari Richmond. Okay, that's fine. I get that the narrative out there is that Seton Hall cannot compete in the Big East because they're going to let an elite guy go off to another school in their conference. And it's a money. And again, the whole thing is if you want to talk about our NIL, tell us where that information's coming from. Give it. I mean, I get you have nobody ever wants to throw a colleague or source over the bus here. I have my suspicions about who mentions our NIL situations that I won't say. We talked about that off. I won't say it. It is what it is. It's just one of those things, and I get it. It's and look, let's be honest here. There's a reason Connecticut has NIL resources. They win, and people invest in a winning program.
Yep.
We sort of know why St. John's has NIL resources because they have a crazy billionaire named Mike Repoli who doesn't know what to do with his money and will throw $2 or $3 million in to get players. He happily brags that they asked him to write a check for Kadari Richmond, and he did it without even hesitating. We know some other schools in the Big East have done better setting up their NIL programs, which is fine. But at the end of the day, it's such, and I'm glad somebody else said this, and it was an anonymous person, but at least somebody else said that's a lazy take. Because if NIL was winning people national championships, then Kansas should have won a national championship.
Yep.
Duke and North Carolina should have won national championships because they have ridiculous NIL. Why did Villanova not make the tournament the last 2 years with top 3 NIL in the Big East? So don't give me your lectures about. I mean, if you want to feel sorry for Shaheen Holloway, and if somebody wants to set up a situation where they ship Holloway off to a school that has NIL resources, that's fine. That's up to Holloway. I mean, we can talk about this later in the season about what Shaheen Holloway thinks or what may or may not be in his mind about the fact that he says himself, I have the NIL that I need to play with, and I can compete with the NIL that Seton Hall and their fans give him. So, and they won 25 games in an NIT title last year when people said we didn't have the NIL to compete. So, to the Seth Davises of this world and anybody else who wants to badmouth for NIL, show me the trophies that Duke has won over the past 3 years with all the NIL in the world. Show me the trophies that Seth Greenberg's favorite schools have won without the with NIL money. That's the point. Show me what anybody who has NIL besides Connecticut has done with it. And the answer is they haven't. So, as much as everyone gets pumped up about this NIL stuff, if NIL was the reason why teams are winning and teams were losing, then we've had so many examples of schools that have NIL that have underperformed in the first 3 seasons, and will never get there because they're just not good basketball schools. So, just leave your comments to NIL to yourself because you feel the need to feel sorry. Shaheen Holloway doesn't feel sorry for himself that he may not have the NIL that some of these other schools have. At least he doesn't say so publicly. So, why didn't you, if Seth Davis was so worried about it, why didn't he talk about Butler not having an IL? I don't know. Why did, dump? There are other places which may not have NAL that aren't doing very well in major conferences. Talk about them once in a while instead of having a knee-jerk reaction because you for whatever reason you feel the need to do this. So
Yeah.
I'll get off my NIL. We'll have a day if we get to that point later on in the season where we're going to talk about why NIL is not the be all and end all, or maybe we'll have a conversation about why there's a different day for a conversation about Seton Hall's NIL problems if they have them, and we'll see where that goes from there.
Yeah. So, Seth Davis regarding this, as The Rock says, know your role and shut your mouth and keep Seton Hall's name out of your mouth. I think that's I think I could probably summarize your whole take. I probably could sum it up in know your role and shut your mouth and keep Seton Hall's name out of your 15 words. I summarized it in 15 words. Not even Chat GPT could have done that. I'll tell you that right now. So I think that's the perfect place to end this episode of Hoist the Colors. Thank you for tuning in. But so the spoiler alert, this might not be the only episode this week because with Wagner coming up this weekend, we are hopefully, knock on wood here too, that we're going to have Donald Copeland, the head coach of the Seahawks and former Seton Hall point guard, on the show to talk about the matchup and, of course, his time here at the Hall. So we're really looking forward to it, and fingers crossed that it will actually happen. So be on the lookout for that. That will most likely come out Friday before the game at Walsh on Saturday afternoon. So for Pat Madden, I'm Tim Best. Thanks for tuning in to this edition of Hoist the Colors. Happy Veterans Day, and a huge thank you to all who have served and are currently serving in our armed forces. And until next time, onward to Tonia.